Hello there, Sharks. I'm Jonathan Little, here today with one of my favorite people in the world, Johnny Betancourt. He is the owner,
Yep.
the Chief Academic Officer of Clutch Prep. What does Clutch Prep do?
Clutch Prep turns college textbooks into video tutorials so that students that are trying to study these pre-med classes can learn more efficiently and through short-form video instead of having to read their textbooks.
I hated reading my textbooks when I was in college. They would tell me to read 60 pages, and I'd be like, I'll just take a nap. I'll go play poker instead.
But now we have Clutch Prep, so students like you could actually become doctors, which is scary.
Yeah. You all may not know this, but at pokercoaching.com, I'm not the only person who works there. And I realized a long time ago that I don't know how to teach people anything. I'm just winging it over here. Johnny's a legitimate professional at teaching people things. So I had Johnny outline and to some extent help design my tournament masterclass, which has been very well received, and it teaches you everything you need to know to succeed at poker tournaments. So I figured I'd have Johnny on today so we can discuss tips to help you make the most of your learning time. Now, this video is going to be for people who have a little bit of time to learn. This is not for hardcore professional poker players who have 40 hours a week to study poker. This is for people who have a little bit of time to play poker, a little bit of time to study, and you want to make the most of it, because I realize your time is very valuable. We'll have a video for people who are going super deep later. So, how do you do it? How do you make good use of your limited study time?
Well, what we want to do, Jonathan, is we want to create an environment of active recall so that when you are at the table, you're using those suboptimal plays to actually learn from. Because again, you don't have a whole lot of time to study. So the first thing that we're going to want to do, and you talk about this all the time in your training videos, is learn how to write down your hand histories. Because if you're not learning from your mistakes, you're just going to keep repeating those same mistakes over and over again, and you're going to be the person at the table that other people are crushing. So the first thing we need to do is learn how to write our hand histories, and Jonathan has a video for that.
I do. You can find it at jlpoker.com/notes. I think we'll put a link in the description below. But really, you just need to find something that works for you. Currently what I do now is I just write it in my phone. I write my hand, the effective stack, the blinds, and my position at the top, 4 things. And then I just write the action. Like somebody raised, I called. When I say somebody, I mean note their specific position. Then write the board, the flop, what the flop came, the action, the turn, the action, the river, the action. That's what I write down. And I can write that down in my phone in about 30 seconds. Which is about the time it takes the dealer to shuffle the cards and deal the next hand. It works out nicely, but it takes a little bit of practice. You will have to practice in order to be able to do this quickly, but it is well worth it, because if you don't write down your hands, how are you going to learn? You're just gambling at that point.
Exactly, and then you're missing out on valuable study time. Again, we're talking to the student that doesn't have a bunch of time. You need to be turning those hands into learning opportunities. So now you have your hand histories. So the next thing you want to do is you want to start bucketing those hand histories into different categories of inefficiencies, different ways that these hands did not go right for you. Let's say that you can put them into a bucket, and one bucket is that you keep getting to showdown with the losing hand. So you keep, every time you're there, you keep getting, you have a weaker hand, or maybe you keep getting to showdown with a hand that you could have extracted more value from. Maybe you keep folding to raises. Maybe you keep folding to bets in general. What you want to do is start categorizing them, and what we're going to start to find is there's going to be underlying mistakes and underlying patterns of mistakes that are bringing you to those places. So Jonathan, I mentioned a few buckets. I kind of just made those up, but can you think of what are some other important buckets of categories of errors that students are making?
I mean, maybe you are failing to force your opponent off of their marginal hands, right? Like imagine you do get to the showdown very frequently and you're just losing. You're losing at the showdown. You let it go check too often. A lot of people raise before the flop. Well, they study our charts. They raise the right selection of hands, but usually then they continuation bet a little bit too much. So the range is already a little bit too wide at this point. And then they just check the turn and check the river if they cannot win. That's a big error. And that's something that happens to a lot of people on a regular basis. But yeah, people fold to bets too often. They fold to raises too often. They do all sorts of errors. So
right.
How do you go from taking these errors that you see yourself making, or things that are happening? You don't even necessarily know if it's an error, right? Because sometimes you should give up with your hand, right? That's the tough thing about poker, is it's hard to know if you're actually making an error. Now, I would say, try to hire a private coach. You think coaching is good?
Coaching is great.
Yeah, you should hire a private coach if that's within your means. We also have a vibrant Discord at pokercoaching.com where you can post your hands and get real feedback. But if you're trying to do it on your own, you want to make sure that you are doing your best to figure out where you are going wrong so that you can then fix your strategy so that you're not in that scenario.
Exactly. So the challenging part is then how do you take those buckets and turn it into actual learning that you can apply for next time? And this is where I think Jonathan's content can be really, really helpful, because what you're going to find is that there are several potential reasons that you are ending up to showdown with maybe a weaker range than usual. Like Jonathan mentioned in his example, maybe you are just letting it go check too often. But what you could then do is figure out what are like the top 1 or 2 or 3 patterns that are contributing, maybe the weaknesses in my game that are contributing to me being in this position often. And Jonathan has a lot of content around this. So for example, c-betting frequencies. If you're noticing that you just always continuation bet the flop because that's what you thought you were supposed to do, and you keep getting to showdown with weak hands, that would be a great place to start plugging in those holes and start fixing those patterns through, first of all, self-awareness to see where are the places that my game is weak, and then plugging those holes with specific content that could help. And this is where Jonathan has a lot of topical poker-based content that can help you with those specific gaps where you might be struggling.
Yeah, I have a training site, pokercoaching.com. And if you go into the classes section there, you can type in like any poker question and you will get a video explaining how to play that specific scenario. But it's hard for people to be able to pinpoint exactly what they do wrong. And I think also watching people who are very good play and actually implement these strategies is very beneficial as well. The problem is for people who don't play a lot of poker, they don't get to see a lot of showdowns when they're playing, right? So you may not even necessarily know what you're doing wrong. Like say you raise and continuation bet the flop and your opponent seemed to raise you a lot. It's perhaps difficult for people to know I'm continuation betting too often.
And then what I would say, Jonathan, is in that case what you're talking about is a player that not only doesn't have a lot of time to study, they're also not playing a lot of poker either.
Yeah.
So in that case, that's where the quizzes can be really helpful,
Sure.
I believe, because what you have with these quizzes, I think you have like 1,000 of these video-based quizzes.
1,500.
1,500. So you go through and you can start to see your scores on each street, right? So if you notice that you're getting like poor scores on the river constantly, now that might be an even faster way to diagnose where you might be going wrong without having to play a ton of hands. But ultimately, like the way you're going to get better is through writing down your hand histories and playing a lot of poker and then studying off the table. But we're trying to talk about tips and tricks for maybe those of you that don't have a whole lot of time. And I would say quizzes is another good way to go.
Yeah, quizzes are great because you can go through a lot of hands quickly without actually risking your money, right? It's very expensive to learn at the poker table. They've taught me a few times there.
Yeah.
And
I paid my tuition.
Yeah, it's expensive. It's way more expensive than college for some people. But so anyway, yeah, go through the quizzes because that's an easy way to get real-time feedback about things you are doing incorrectly. And if let's say you do get a bad score on the flop every time, especially in scenarios where you were the pre-flop raiser, why are you playing the spot poorly, right? And it's usually pretty easy to see. They say to bet, and I check every time. Or they say to check with this marginal made hands on the flop, let's say, and I always bet them. So that's a good way to figure out like these actions that you're taking on a regular basis that you should stop. They'll result in fixing a lot of other problems in your game. Because if you get to the river with way too wide of a range, there's not a whole lot you can do. You're going to lose. Hate to break it to you. So you have to make sure you're plugging the leaks. Get in there and study. Work hard.
Yep. Gotta do it.
Anything else?
That's it. Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Check out Clutch Prep if you want to go back to school. Have fun. Thanks for being here. Hello. Do I have your attention? Good. You know I love to give away lots of free strategy advice here on my YouTube channel, so do me a quick favor. Can you click the subscribe button right here and right down here below? Thank you. See you in the next video.